All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for coming to Citrix Synergy and Citrix TechEdge. My name is Adolfo Montoya, and I'm going to go ahead and talk about our newest XenMobile solution, which is XenMobile 10, that was released back in January. And the idea behind this session is I want to give you just a general overview of what XenMobile is, just in case some of you have, still haven't experienced yet what it is and how do we get this mobility management solution in place. And following that, I'm going to go ahead and explain more in details how the solution works behind the scenes with not only with other Citrix products, but also with other components that you have in the data center. I work for the readiness department at Citrix, which is basically the department that creates technical training content for the support engineers. And my main role essentially is to make sure that those engineers know what they're doing when dealing with XenMobile, because that's my core area. But I also work on the NetScaler and the receiver side of things on Citrix. This is what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to go over what's new on XenMobile 10, basically just to give you an idea what is this enterprise mobility management solution is targeting for our mobile customers, and obviously what is the benefit. Next, we're going to discuss the differences between XenMobile 10 and XenMobile 9, or even earlier releases, because from the architectural perspective, there's big differences, and I want to talk about those, and hopefully you can actually understand exactly how things work behind the scenes. Following that, we're going to jump into the security. What are some of the key features that we have available for XenMobile 10 that you can take advantage depending on your security regulations and requirements on in your data center. Following that, we're going to go over the deployment best practices and communication flows to show you exactly how, where the XenMobile solution is deployed and how does that interact with other Citrix products like NetScaler, Storefront, XenApps, and Desktop, and so on. And finally, I'm going to go ahead and show you how in 15 minutes you can literally deploy the XenMobile 10 solution. As long as you have all the prerequisites in place, your IP addresses, your FQDNs, et cetera, it should be a matter of literally like 15 minutes and should be no-brainer. But we're going to go ahead and get started. All right, the first thing I want to talk about is this statement: mobility user experience matters. And one of the things about XenMobile is, yes, it is an enterprise mobility management solution. There are many out there and so on, but one of the key targets for Citrix is to make sure that your user experience is the main goal. So at the end of the day, yes, we can carry multiple mobile devices, tablets, et cetera, but at the end of the day, you want to be the most productive user or the most productive employee at the end. You could be working from a library, from your home, from your office, but you need the right tools to be at hand at the right place. So, and that's the key about XenMobile. What we have changed lately is to make sure that those new releases are coming quicker instead of waiting for quarters and make sure that we actually deliver like a newer version. We actually speed up the development cycle to be a 9-week development cycle. So it's going to be a much quicker deployment of the solution and also be able to get those new features in place at the right time. So what's new on XenMobile 10? XenMobile 10, these are the key messages that we have for the solution. And one of the key areas that we want to focus on is administration. Because in the past, we used to have two completely independent components, the XenMobile App Controller and the XenMobile Device Manager. Those are two different components that handle two different things. You have the App Controller that handles what we call the mobile application management, which is essentially the data that you actually have, that you're handling on your mobile device. And you have the MDM, or the Mobile Device Management, which is controlled by the device manager. Again, the idea is to be able to control the mobile device at the physical level. If you actually walk out from a perimeter, we want to make sure that we can essentially secure the data that you have on your mobile device at that point. So administration is what was one of the key goals from XenMobile 10. So now we have everything in a simplified console. In a single console, you should be able to create policies. You should be able to deploy applications that you built in-house. And you can enforce specific policies, maybe per application or globally at the device level. So that's one of the things. The next one is the architecture. Architecturally, we have unified both solutions into one virtual machine. And one of the key, I guess one of the key enhancements is the fact that we went from a 32-bit to a 64-bit. From a scalability perspective, now you can go beyond the 4 gigabytes of RAM that we used to have on the app controller solution. You can actually go beyond like 6, 8 gigs, or even 10 if you want to. I mean, depending on what are your needs and so forth. So yeah, you can actually reach up to 100,000 concurrent users if that's the case for your for the use case. When it comes to security, we XenMobile 10 is a FIPS compliant 140-2. Essentially we're securing the data that is either at rest on the mobile device or in motion in the network. Obviously, that requires other components in place to make sure that you're fully FIPS compliant, not only just the XenMobile server or solution. You need to have the NetScaler NPX that is FIPS compliant, and you also need to have the SQL database solution from Microsoft to make properly configured for FIPS, with the FIPS settings. And finally, when it comes to productivity workflows on the Works applications, we have made several enhancements to make sure that the Works applications work together. Like Worksmail be able to join a GoToMeeting session just by tapping join meeting in that case. If you want to create a note, you can actually just call the Works Notes application and you can create your meeting notes and be able to share those via PDF document with your colleagues if that's the case. So a lot of the enhancements have been put in place to make sure that the productivity is actually enhanced for the end users at the end of the day. This is the complete stack of the XenMobile 10 solution, or actually in general for XenMobile. And one of the things that that want to emphasize is we have these 4 stacks from bottom up. We have the device management, which is at the end of the day you want to be able to control those mobile devices. In terms of if you have corporate-owned devices, you want to make sure that those corporate-owned devices have very restricted policies to make sure if the phone gets lost or gets stolen, at least you can control what applications or what data were there and you can wipe them out if that's the case. When it comes to application management, that's what we call the MAM portion, the mobile application management. This is where you can control how does the application behaves on your mobile device. Are you allowing the application to interact with other applications on your phone or just to interact with any Works suite applications in that sense? You can also control like the camera if you want to allow people to take pictures or not, and be able to share those in between applications. The data management, that's essentially that's basically where ShareFile comes into play, because you want to be able to allow those end users access any Office documents, files that they have either saved on SharePoint, shared file on the premise, etc. Make sure that you actually have that properly in place. And then finally, you have the productivity and collaboration apps, which is essentially our Work Suite applications, where you can access your email, you can access your intranet sites using Works Web, you can take notes by leveraging the Works Notes application, and so forth. I'll explain those Work Suites applications in the next few slides. Now, when it comes to the offerings of XenMobile, we have 3 main editions, and let me start explaining which one of those. The first one is the XenMobile MDM, the mobile device management. I guess that's the simplest one because basically what you're saying is I want to be able to control the mobile devices at the physical level, and I want to be able to have the control to either wipe them out or just wipe out the information that pertains to the company. So this is the one, and key thing about XenMobile 10 release is the fact that we have moved completely to the Citrix V6 licensing, meaning that if you have an existing, let's say XenApp or XenDesktop infrastructure, and you want to leverage the same Citrix licensing server, you can actually just upload your XenMobile licenses to the same server, and that's it, and you're ready to go. You just need to point to that licensing server. The next one is the Works apps. The Works apps, I mean, the Works Home client, which is the client that allows you to get enrolled and get access to those policies and applications and so on. That's the one that is required on your mobile device to be able to access the XenMobile solution. But then you have the Works Edit. And the Works Edit is the one that allows end users to, access documents or files that you have on maybe on your local mobile device, be able to edit them and be able to save those changes and return those changes maybe back to to your colleagues, if that's the case. The next one is the XenMobile Advanced Edition. And the Advanced Edition is a rebrand of what we used to call the XenMobile App Edition. Key differences between the old App Edition and the Advanced Edition is the fact that Advanced Edition now gives you the option to also do MDM features or capabilities. So not only you can control how does the application behaves on your mobile device, but you can also control how does the mobile device is gonna actually behave on your corporate network or outside of the premises. And that's where the MDM comes into play. Same as the XenMobile MDM, it requires Citrix v6 licensing. And when it comes to the Work Suite applications, there's actually a more handful applications available for that edition. We have the Worksmail, Worksweb, and the Worksedit. I mean, the Worksmail is your email client, so you can access your Exchange Server mailbox or your Lotus Notes mailbox. And when it comes to the Worksweb, that's basically our secure browser, so you can configure bookmarks, you can set up blacklist, whitelist, and so forth. And the Worksedit, again, is the one that allows you to get access to your Office documents, be able to edit them, and be able to save those changes and share them back to other users. And finally, the XenMobile Enterprise, that's essentially the edition that we haven't changed yet. I mean, this remains the same thing as previous releases. Key thing about it is like you see like there's a more handful list of Works applications because this is the one that has everything about XenMobile solution, including the Shared File Enterprise, if you notice. So by getting the XenMobile Enterprise, you get the benefit of be able to manage the data for those end users, either on the premise or on the cloud. That's the beauty about shared file. You can have either the shared file server on the premise because maybe you want to keep that information intact in your data center, or you want to keep everything on the cloud just for resources. I'll go to the questions in a moment. Now, when it comes to the productivity apps, let me actually explain a little bit more how every single app, what it is and how it behaves on a XenMobile solution. So the first one is the Worksmail app. The Worksmail is our native in-house application that we create at Citrix that we provide to the customer, to make sure that you can deliver those apps to your mobile users. We support it on the iOS, Android, and Windows Phone 8.1 platforms. And it supports Active Sync protocol, so we can connect to an Exchange Server or even to a Lotus Notes solution behind the scenes. It's very intuitive. I mean, it actually allows you to create calendar invites, be able to insert GoToMeeting invitations without without actually going back and forth too many times in between the resources or the apps on your phone. The next one is the Worksweb, the mobile secure browser. This is the one of the key benefits about it is the fact that if you're an end user, you want to be able to access intranet sites, you don't have to create a full tunnel on your phone and be able to access those resources. Instead, what it does is we actually leverage what we call a micro VPN connection port application. And that micro VPN connection is handled by the NetScaler, or is controlled by the NetScaler. So the NetScaler is going to be the one deciding, okay, yes, you have access to the micro VPN connection. You can get access to the SharePoint server, Exchange, DNS, and so forth. So that's one thing. The other great thing about it is that from the administrator perspective, you can define which URLs can users navigate, which ones is going to be a whitelist. You can set up a homepage and even hide the entire control panel if you want. Just show them a website and that's it. They don't have access to anything else. The next one is the shared file app. And again, this is the one that allows clients access Office documents or files that they have either on the premise or on the cloud. So you can have a shared file storage, what we call the shared file storage zone controller, seated on the premise. And that server will be able to contact your SharePoint server, pull up whatever files you have in there, and be able to allow end users access those files and be able to work in them, and even save those changes back to the premise. Or you have the option to have users access their own file shares using the share file client and do the same thing. Work on their documents, be able to save them, and again, all the documentation or all the data will remain on the data center. Works Notes, this is the one that allows, it works very closely with Worksmail. In the event that you're launching a meeting and you want to make sure that you take notes and you want to share those notes across your colleagues or your attendees, you can take them, you can share them with a PDF. Most of the times that we recommend is to have Works Notes configured with share file. So that way your nodes are really following you no matter what device you're connecting from. So at least because the share file account is either on the, is most likely on the cloud, and you will be able to pull those nodes at any time. The next one is the Works Edit. The Works Edit is the application that allows end users be able to access Microsoft Office documents, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, etc. You should be able to access those documents online or offline, depending on how you set it up. Be able to save those files back to the, back to the premise, either on share file or maybe locally if that's okay with you. And you can also review or even add more comments if the, if the track changes is available on the, in the particular file. The Works Desktop. The Works Desktop app is a little bit different. I mean, this application behaves very closely as Go to My PC. So if some of you have seen it, Go to My PC, how it works, how you connect to your remote PC at home, etc., it's pretty much the same thing. One of the key differences is the fact that, number one, the connection is being controlled by the NetScaler because you have a micro VPN connection being handled at that point. Second of all, the format, the user interface is native. You don't actually have to zoom in, zoom out in order to be able to see your documents or your files. Everything is a native format that we display your home desk, your home PC or your office PC. You can access applications, you can access files in a native format from your iPad or even from your Android device. Finally, the Works Tasks. The Works Tasks application is our recent application that we have available right now on Citrix.com. It is currently it's on tech preview. What it allows you to do is be able to access your tasks that you have created on your Outlook mailbox. And if you want to make sure that you want to be able to access those tasks and you want to make some changes, create new ones, and create meeting invites, you can do so and be able to synchronize those back to Outlook. So that's really, really a great feature. So now let me just change the topic a little bit, and let me talk about the differences between CenMobile 10 and CenMobile 9, more from the architectural perspective, because there are quite a few differences. So let me start with the pre-CenMobile 10 architecture. This was a a typical CenMobile deployment. You have the app controller, which essentially is the MAM component, the mobile application management. And then on the right-hand side, we have the device manager, which is the MDM component, the mobile device management. So the app controller on the left-hand side is essentially a Linux VM that you can run on Hyper-V, VMware, or XenServer. Benefit about it, well, this is the one that you can, this is where you upload all your Works applications. This is where you publish your links to your for your end users. This is the place that you control whether the clipboard is going to be available or not on your application, whether or not applications can work together, etc. So this is the main component for that. If you notice, on the app controller, we have a database. That database has nothing to do with the database on the device manager. So from the administration point of view, you can see that there is some, it's going to require some extra work because you need to actually maintain an app controller component and also a device manager to make sure you have the right settings on the device manager and those correlate with your app controller system. Now the device manager, if you notice, is a Windows machine. It could be a physical machine or a virtual machine, whatever it is. But on top of that, it runs Tomcat, because the Tomcat service is the one that handles all the web services and processes that we need to handle for the MDM portion of the solution. From the database, again, what I mentioned earlier is that this is the database that actually handles all the configuration and all the policies when it comes to restricting access to to a specific perimeter, or maybe if you want to wipe out a specific application or device. Now, with CenMobile 10, we have essentially changed all of that. We have actually unified both solutions into one single instance, into one single virtual machine. And what I would like to point out is, again, we still have a virtual machine. It actually runs on most common hypervisors, VMware, XenServer, Hyper-V. And the other thing is the fact that we actually have upgraded the Linux operating system on this system. It's a 3.4 custom code, obviously, to make sure that it's highly secure. It is FIPS compliant, and is also a 64-bit appliance, meaning that we can actually go beyond the 4 gigabytes, the limit that we used to have for the app controller system. Few things that I want to point out in regards to the core services. The MDM, that's basically the one that handles the device management portion of the XenMobile solution. Again, you want to be able to make sure that you have either be able to control how the mobile device behaves out of the perimeter of your office, or if it gets stolen or if it gets lost, then you can actually have the control to wipe it out if that's the case. You have the MAM, the mobile application management, and this is the one, again, it just controls your mobile application data on your mobile device. So this is the one that you have a lot of different policy settings that you can tweak in and make sure that you can say, okay, I want this application to behave very restrictive, but this other application I want it to be quite open because it's not going to handle too much corporate data. The OCA is actually a feature. This stands for the Open Cloud Access. And this particular service is the one that handles the provisioning, the user provisioning when we want XenMobile to create end-user accounts on the cloud for ShareFile, for example. If you want the XenMobile system to create those accounts for you automatically, instead of creating manually 100 users that you have on your network in ShareFile on the cloud, you can let the XenMobile server handle that for you, and that's basically the core service that handles that portion of it. The unified console, as I said earlier, that's the great benefit. Again, from the single console, you can access both solutions. You can control policies for MDM or app or the MAM portion and be able to enforce them to the end users. One thing that I want to point out is when it comes to the database, if you notice, we still have two options. You either can deploy the XenMobile solution on a Postgre or using a Microsoft SQL. For production, we definitely recommend Microsoft SQL because, again, at the end of the day, you don't want to have just one XenMobile server. You want to have multiple nodes on your cluster solution. So all your nodes will be pointing to the same database, reading exactly the same, reading the same information, like licenses, configuration settings, etc., or certificates. The PostgreSQL is there more like for a demo or POC purposes, proof of concepts. You want to quickly deploy XenMobile. You want to see how it looks like, how it behaves on your environment, just for a few, for a few users that you want to test it out. That will be the best choice at that point. When it comes to security, let me go ahead and talk about some of the key features that XenMobile 10 offers to our end users as well. And let me start with the micro VPN or the MVPN. This is the one that it is a solution that allows end users access internet resources literally almost invisibly. You don't have to create a full tunnel on your phone or your tablet to be able to access internal resources. Essentially, what happens is the workshop client is going to be the one connecting to your network via the NetScaler, and it's going to be the one deciding, okay, which application will have access to the internal resources, which one will not have access to the internal resources. So it's a great key feature. The next one is the MDM policies, and this is the one that handles the restrictions that you can apply to your mobile device. Once again, I keep saying the same thing, but it's like you can actually have mobile devices work in a specific perimeter, like let's say in this conference room, and as soon as you walk out, basically the phone is going to be useless. You can actually make that happen. You can also push certificates if that's the case with the MDM policies. You can update mailbox accounts, etc. There are many features. The next one is the workspin. The workspin is not just a PIN number. In reality, what it is we're trying to containerize your Windows credentials that you actually log on that you enter on your workshop client the first time. By the time you get configured, by the time you get enrolled on the system will ask you for a workspin number. What it does is it's going to go ahead and secure those credentials locally on your mobile device, and the next time we need to actually retrieve those credentials, or in the event the credentials get expire, you will be prompted to enter a new password or so on. But the benefit of the workspin is you don't have to re-enter your password, your 10, 15 character password. Instead, you just enter a 4-digit or 6-digit PIN number. Now, the PIN number can be adjusted just to be like a very simple PIN number, like 1, 2, 3, 4, or you can make it very complex, like You want to put special characters, alphanumeric, and so on. Final one is the FIPS. And as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the FIPS, XenMobile 10 is fully FIPS compliant. Again, not just from the XenMobile perspective that you need to turn it on, this feature, but you also need to have in place a NetScaler MPX appliance that supports this feature, and also the excuse me, the Microsoft SQL database behind the scenes. Okay. So now let me change the subject and let's talk about best practices and communication flow. You know, where do we actually sit the XenMobile server solution, and how does that really communicate with other components behind the scenes? So the first thing that I want to discuss is XenMobile server sits in the DMC, and I mean, that's what we recommend, but that doesn't mean that it has to be on the DMC. You can place it on the internal network, that's okay, but just keep in mind the number of ports that need to be open in between you know, the XenMobile server and the backend resources. So if you notice, what I have over here is the NetScaler appliance. In a single NetScaler appliance, you will see that you have multiple virtual servers. You have 2 virtual servers for handling the MDM traffic, load balancing the MDM traffic for XenMobile. The third one is a new one that we introduced with XenMobile 10, which is the MAM load balancer. This is the one that takes charge of, which XenMobile server node I need to contact in the event that we need to retrieve new policy information from the MAM portion, the mobile application management. And I'll explain this one a little bit more in detail in a minute. And then we have the NetScaler gateway, which is the one that handles the micro VPN connection, and that's the one that allows us to get access to the internal resources. Now in the back end, in the internal network, we have, these are most of the common resources that most of the times we see on the customer sites, but obviously there could be many more. But just to name a few, we have the licensing server, what I mentioned earlier. This is, now with XenMobile 10, we need to have Citrix v6 licensing instead of the legacy licensing server. Next, we have the storefront server, where you can also have your XenApp and XenDesktop infrastructure. Obviously there are more components in that end, but at the end of the day, the XenMobile server only sees the storefront server, and beyond that is the job of the storefront server be able to communicate with the backend XenApp or XenDesktop infrastructure. And when it comes to configuration, SQL, again, that's the best recommendation we can give you. Make sure that the SQL solution is fully, is in an HA format or cluster in this case, to ensure that there's always availability when it comes to XenMobile trying to retrieve the configuration information, just like on XenDesktop, pretty much. So let me explain how this whole process works. How does that end user gets enrolled, and how do we get access to those mobile resources from the XenMobile solution? So the first thing that we need to have in place is the Workzone client. And the Workzone client, you can get it on the App Store or Google Play Store, or even on the Samsung store if you're using a Samsung Knox device. So we get the Workzone application installed. You launch it. The first thing that we're going to ask you is, okay, go ahead and give me the username and the URL of the XenMobile solution so we can get enrolled. So Workzone, what it does is going to go ahead and send a request to the NetScaler. Again, assuming that you have a NetScaler protecting your XenMobile infrastructure, the XenMobile is going to go ahead and intercept the communication. The first time that we're going to hit the NetScaler is going to be on this particular load balancer, the 443. Why? Well, because first of all, we haven't been enrolled yet. We need to find out, who this user is, pretty much. So as soon as the NetScaler receives the incoming connection, it's going to use the SNP or the MIP, depending on what you have set it up in the backend. We're going to go ahead and contact the backend XenMobile server. We contact the XenMobile server. XenMobile server says, okay, I don't know who this user is. I need to go ahead and challenge this user for credentials. So we ask for username and password. The end user submits the username and password information. And then XenMobile is going to go ahead and check with Active Directory, either on port 389 or 636, depending on how what are your requirements in that case. Once Active Directory validates those user credentials, the next step for, the next step for XenMobile is to be able to enforce those policies, those MDM policy restrictions. And this is where this particular load balancer comes into play, the 8443. Mainly for iOS devices, this is where this particular load balancer will really be a key player, because for iOS devices, we need to make sure that we have this port available for the enrollment process. So Workzone is gonna contact the second load balancer. The second load balancer then is gonna go ahead and contact the XenMobile server. The XenMobile server then is gonna query the Microsoft SQL database that you have behind the scenes. Why? Because the Microsoft SQL database is the one holding all your configuration settings, your policies, your MDM restrictions, all of that is gonna be saved in that location. So we retrieve the SQL database and we send to the end user those policies that you wanna enforce. Now, if you notice on the graph, we also have what we call the APNS, the Apple Push Notification Service. This network is essentially the one that handles how do we actually communicate with iOS devices, with iPads and iPhones? Because there is no way for us to communicate directly to those phones. We need to have a middle person. In this case, it's Apple's network. So in order for that to happen, we need to make sure that the XenMobile server can contact this network over these ports, 2195, 2196. If that's successful, then essentially APNS is gonna notify the mobile device that, hey, mobile device, I have this MDM solution trying to push some notifications or some policies at that point. So, and again, that's just the enrollment process. What happens next? How do we get access to the what we call the work store, your application list? At that point, what happens is, let's assume that enrollment is successful, everything is great. The next thing for XenMobile server is to notify the Workzone client. Hey, Workzone client, I need you to go to this particular URL, which is essentially the NetScaler gateway. And by sending this URL, essentially Workzone is gonna create a new SSL connection over this virtual server. That's the virtual server where we're gonna create that micro VPN connection, talk to the NetScaler gateway. NetScaler is gonna challenge the end user for username and password. But again, from the end user point of view, all of that is invisible. You're not actually seeing any challenge. You're not seeing anything prompts to re-enter those credentials because again, we already provided those credentials the first time. So the credentials are, those credentials already supplied will be passed again from Workzone to NetScaler, and NetScaler is gonna verify those credentials with Active Directory behind the scenes. Again, assuming everything is great from that point of view, NetScaler is gonna use, next step is gonna do a lookback connection. And it's gonna contact what we call the MAM load balancer. And the MAM load balancer is the one that is gonna decide, okay, which XenMobile server node I need to reach back in order to allow the end user see the application list and enforce any MDX policies in that sense. Now, this particular load balancer, one of the key things that I wanna make sure everybody kind of understands is the IP doesn't have to be a public IP. It could be an internal IP, but it has to be part of the private address scheme. It has to follow the RFC 1918 format, because otherwise what happens is the NetScaler is gonna try to contact this load balancer. The load balancer is gonna try to reach back to the XenMobile server, and if he finds out that the load balancer doesn't have a real or like a standard private IP address, it's gonna go ahead and shut down the single sign-on process and it's gonna fail. So that's very typical what we've seen lately. So make sure that you're actually using private IP addresses in this load balancer, so at least we know for sure the NetScaler can talk fine with the XenMobile server behind the scenes and allow you to see the application list. What happens next is when it comes to the deploying the mobile applications, if you request to deliver to download an application, what happens is the XenMobile server, in this case, let's say for iOS devices, we need to also notify the APNS network to say, hey, this user requires to download this application. I need to notify APNS, and APNS is gonna locate the device and finally start the download process at that level. Now, some takeaways before we jump into the demo that I wanna just go ahead and remind you about this presentation is, XenMobile is basically Citrix Enterprise Mobility Management Solution. And one of the key areas about this is obviously security, and the other thing is user experience. Because we want to make sure that not only that you're mobile, but you want to make sure that you can also work securely and be able to be productive anywhere that you want. When it comes to XenMobile editions, we discussed the XenMobile MDM, Advanced, and the Enterprise. The Enterprise is obviously the best choice because you can get access also to share file and be able to manipulate whether you want to have your documents on the premise or you want to have your documents on the cloud, if that's the case. And when it comes to security, micro-VPN, great feature. You can actually set it up in such a way that you can have the NetScaler assign individual IPs to every single mobile user, if that's what you want. Or you can actually just have one IP being used, which is essentially the NetScaler IP, to be able to contact the backend resources. Restriction policies, again, these are the ones that enforce policies at the mobile device level to make sure that we can have certain restrictions applicable and be able to control at the low level the mobile device. FIPS compliant, again, we can secure the data either at motion or at rest on the mobile device, again, to make sure that all your documents and data, there is no leakage at that level. And when it comes to the word spin, that's basically that's one of the ways that you can containerize your Windows credentials. So instead of entering those credentials over and over, all you need to do is enter a PIN number, and that PIN number is going to take care of the rest behind the scenes. Insight services, that's basically, it's a great tool that you can use for troubleshooting XenMobile. What we recommend about it is, anytime that you have some trouble and you want to say, okay, let me just find out what's going on with my deployment, you can take the XenMobile support bundle, upload it to the Insight services, and it will tell you exactly, what could be the issue. If it's a NetScaler misconfiguration, if the XenMobile server is missing a particular parameter that you forgot or something, at least the Insight services is going to give you those right choices in some KB articles as well, if there is a more complex deployment. And with that being said, let me go ahead and jump into the demo. Let me give you a demonstration of how we can deploy the XenMobile solution literally in less than 15 minutes, which is basically what I have. Let me go ahead and. All right, so this is a typical XenMobile solution. I mean, this is a sensor that I have on my home lab. And I have a licensing server, XenMobile server, brand new, no configuration yet. XenApp 7.6 controller, so I can get access to my Windows applications and resources, storefront, and so forth. So let me start first with the first thing that XenMobile is going to ask is to change the administrator credentials. So I'm going to go ahead and make it simple. Citrix 123. Next thing is to define the IP address. Subnet masks. And the default gateway. Then you define your primary DNS server. If you have another DNS server, you can define it, but it's not mandatory. And then, yes, I want to apply those changes. The next thing is you want to actually secure all the data that is handled by the XenMobile server. I will say yes in creating a random passphrase. And then, there you go. All right. It's not showing the screen. All right, let me move on. In this one is basically the FIPS mode if you want to enable or disable FIPS. But in this case, I don't want to enable it because I want to keep it short and sweet. Now, when it comes to the database connection, again, you can use either local or remote. I'm going to use remote so we can connect to a Microsoft SQL database that I have behind the scenes. You can enable SSL if that's your preference. Define your SQL Server connection. Define the port number. If it's something other than 1433, you can do so. You can use SQL authentication accounts, or you can also use Windows authentication if that's what you have. In my case, I have a Windows administrator. I'm just going to use that. And then define the database name. I'm just going to call this Dolfo, let's say 5. And then yes. It's going to connect to the Microsoft SQL database. It's going to start creating, pre-initializing the database in the tables. So now that it's done is, would you like to enable cluster? Would you like to deploy multiple XenMobile servers for high availability? Again, for simplicity, I'm just going to say no. Now for the FQDN, make sure that this FQDN is something that is going to be resolvable from the outside world, because at the end of the day, you need to have those MDM users be able to enroll at some point. So again, but for demo purposes, I'm just going to call it like this and say yes. Communication ports. These are the communication ports that we use by default, port 80, HTTPS, and 8443, but you are more than welcome to change those if you want. Next step is to create the self-signed certificates on the system. The system is going to allow you to say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and create a sample certificate, a web server certificate for your web service connections. I'm just going to use the self-sign, and I'm going to actually use just a simple password for now. Now, if you prefer to use your own certificates, you can do so when we actually log into the web management console. You will see an option that you can import PFX certificates or PEM or so forth. Administrator, what type of administrator would you like to create? In this case, I'm just going to leave it the default, which is administrator, and the password. And then would you like to upgrade from a previous release? In this case, no, I don't have anything else. So, so at this time, it's going to go ahead and start applying all the changes that I just made in this wizard. And at the end of the day, it's going to go ahead and start the Tomcat service to make sure that we can access the web management console and complete the installation, which is licensing, whether or not you have a NetScaler. If you have a NetScaler, would you like to deploy multiple NetScalers pointing to the same XenMobile server? Then the next thing that you can define here is the LDAP, the Active Directory settings. How those domain users will be able to authenticate and be able to get access to the mobile resources or even Windows applications, if that's the case. So it's going to take a few minutes here. Again, the beauty of it is the fact that we just need to actually go through this once, and there is no need to actually go back and start making further changes on this end. As you can see, the wizard just finished, and the next step for me will be to launch the web console. And we just go ahead and connect here. So we log on with the credentials that I just supplied. It's going to go ahead and start the wizard. This is the place that you can define your licensing server. You can either host the licenses on the XenMobile server, or you can have them pointing to a Citrix licensing server behind the scenes. But in this case, I'm just going to use the trial period. This is the place that you can replace the self-signed certificates. If you have your own PFX certificates that you want to use, like a SAN certificate, wildcard, et cetera, you can do so and be able to leverage that security. This is where you define your NetScaler. So whatever the settings you define here, you have to make sure that those matches with the NetScaler that you have in your premise. If you have two-factor authentication on the NetScaler, make sure that the two-factor is enabled over here. So just for simplicity purposes, I'm just going to call this AG training.lab, NSG, domain only, and that's it, pretty much. This is where you define your Active Directory settings. So administrator. That's basically my administrator binding VN. Domain alias. And then at the end, it's going to ask you how would you like your users to log onto the system, whether using user principal names or just using, username and password, pretty much. And then at the end, you have like a notification server prompt where you can define those. You can define whether XenMobile server can notify users via email by pushing email messages to your mobile users in case something happens or you want to run into maintenance. You can actually pre-configure your Exchange server over here. This is a summary of all the settings that I just went through. And then when I click on finish, that's pretty much it. That's basically the XenMobile server up and running. Obviously, the next step will be to define, to configure your NetScaler solution to be able to talk to the XenMobile server. We do actually have built-in wizards that allows you to walk you through the same process that I just did in a matter of minutes. Again, as long as you have all the prerequisites like IPs, virtual servers, certificates, etc., it should be no-brainer. And with that being said, let me just go back here. I know we're running almost out of time, but before you leave, if you please go ahead. One of the sessions that I would recommend that my colleague Juan Ceballos is going to actually go next is the Synergy 403 Troubleshooting Works Mail. It's going to be really, really a great session. It actually shows you the behind the scenes how this application works with Exchange and some of the mail servers that we support. So I would definitely recommend you that. And as my previous colleagues mentioned, I mean, we actually are going to have this event planning of all the tools, all the PowerPoints available in the next coming days.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much, Adolfo. You were awesome. Big round of applause for Adolfo.